8 deals worth $21 million have been struck, and that number does not exactly paint a pretty picture. Top VC investments for the week include the likes of Now Floats, which raised about $9 million, QMath, which raised about $4 million, and BroX, which raised about $3 million. So those are the notable deals in the June 6th to June 10th time period. Other deals in the same time period includes TVS Auto Solutions acquiring 3 startups for a total of 75 crore rupees. So that's a good piece of news coming in as a silver lining to the larger dark clouds in the funding meter. And to understand that better, we have Byju Raveendran, founder of Byju's, and of course Arun Natarajan, founder of Venture Intelligence, joining us live here on ET Now Startup Central. I'm going to take it across to Arun Natarajan first. Arun, thank you so much for taking time out to be with us over here. Tell us, how has the week gone by as far as funding is concerned?
Oh yeah, the week is a quite mid-level kind of week that we have seen. Not too bad and not too great compared to the flow that we have seen. So, we have seen investments in fintech and education tech companies continue to happen. So things are not as bad as we saw a couple of weeks back.
Right. In fact, Krishna, this discussion is going to be focused on the EdTech space because that's what's really hot and happening as far as the deal segment are concerned. Even as consumer internet companies are seeing interest dry up, it's really the EdTech space that's getting a lot of traction, and that's why we have Byju Raveendran with us. He's the founder of Byju, a very popular test prep platform which has now morphed into the K+12 segment, pretty much handling students of every age right now. He's also raised the largest ever funding in the EdTech space. That was like, what, $75 million, Byju?
In the last round.
In the last round, okay. But before I come to Byju's, Arun, if you can quickly give us a roundup of why the EdTech space is so hot and happening, and what's different this time around, the kind of investors entering the EdTech space.
Indeed, Chandra. So clearly we have seen, education is the only significant industry this year where the investments have already crossed the total investments in the 12 months of 2015. So clearly this space is indeed very hot. And Byju's, as you rightly said, has raised $70 million Series C round led by Sofina, Belgium-based investor, and the company, as Byju was saying, has raised almost $100 million. So this is really setting the pace as an industry. Interestingly, this kind of investment is spread across sectors. So obviously Byju's comes from the test preparation tutorial category. We have also seen companies in the assessment and certification kind of companies like EduPristine or Simply Learn also attract investments, quite significant ones. So we also seeing the regulated segment. Private equity investors are returning to the K-12 schools category. We have seen CX Partners invest as much as $60 million into Enspira, which is in the part of the Narayana Group in Hyderabad. And then we have seen the Jain Group in Bangalore raise $35 million from a specialist education infrastructure fund. So we are seeing investments all around in the education space.
Right. Arun, in fact, let me take it to Byju's. Test prep, K-12, nothing new about it. These businesses have been there in the last decade in various forms. I mean, you had Evron, you had Educom, you have traditional players like, your Brilliant Tutorials or, the institutes in Kota. What has really set Byju's apart, and why are investors, from Sofina to Sequoia to Moondak Pai really interested in Byju's? What would you say is, the differentiating factor here?
Okay, I have a very simple answer for that. Almost all the companies which you have named, they are all still addressing, or they addressed not necessarily the most important stakeholder in what we call learning. So if you ask me who are the stakeholders, so we have teachers, we have parents, we have students. Maybe we have been able to differentiate by targeting students, so in business language whom we call the end users, or the real beneficiaries of real learning. Now unfortunately still most of the system is completely based on learning driven by fear of exams and not necessarily because you like learning. Right. So we decided to kind of create a new segment by focusing on students. So if you see all our messages, it's all about making students falling in love with learning, by making them understand the concepts, by generating the curiosity, which is the fundamental need for anyone to start learning better.
Right.
So initially we were very successful in test prep in its conventional format, but we have successfully transitioned to focus on the core part of the learning during the formative years, where you start feeling the subject, where you start figuring out what you are good at and what you like in common language, interests, as well as your capabilities.
Right. Krishna, makes you wish we had something like this in school.
Chandra, makes me wish a lot of things we had in school whenever I see a startup come up with an interesting solution. But this one certainly, we're absolutely spot on as far as that is concerned. I'm just going to take this discussion across to Arun Natarajan. Arun, week after week we've been talking about how the funding tap is drying up, and you said $21 million, 8 deals. You're saying it's like a middling kind of week. Are we finding a new normal as far as the weekly funding meter itself is concerned, considering that a $21 million is considered a middling week as far as funding is concerned in the Indian startup ecosystem?
Absolutely. We really started the year with a very roaring pace, and this has come down because of the e-commerce segment and the consumer segment and a lot of vibes that we are getting from Silicon Valley. But like we are talking about fintech and edge tech now, we are finding diversification by investors across industries, and that will take its time to spread out during the rest of the year, I think.
Right. Byju's, just want to understand the way you monetize this. I mean, how many app downloads did you say you had? Like, has it crossed 1 million, or where are you now?
Since 8 months from launch, we have crossed 4 million downloads.
Right. And how do you monetize it? I mean, when I download it, is it free? What happens later? Is it, a freemium model where it's initially free and I pay? How does it work? How do you make your money?
Yeah, it's a freemium model where some things are always free, but some core part of the learning, which kind of, which I call learning, the testing is always free. It's available for the first 15 to 30 days, after which students get into an annual subscription mode. But we make sure that before they get into the annual subscription, they understand what the product can do for them. We make sure that they like what they see in the app, and that's resulted in such a very high conversion. So more than 4 million downloads, 1.6 lakh students already on subscription. We are doing 25,000 students on a monthly basis, increasing at 10% month on month. So these are the numbers which are very exciting. But if you ask me, compared to the number of students who are in the K-12, India is still the largest K-12 segment in the world with close to 260 million students.
Right.
The numbers which we are doing today is still a very small number.
Right.
So scope for improvement over here in terms of reaching out. So we can do this for many more years to come.
Right. Byju, in fact, I think Arun Natarajan also has a question for you. Arun, a question that you have for Byju at this point?
Yes, indeed, the kind of investors Byju has attracted is very interesting. First they raised money from Arun Capital, which is a family office, then followed by one of the most well-known venture investors, Sequoia Capital, and now they've gone into a private equity investor of international repute like Sofina. So my question is, what is the learning that he has had by tapping these various kinds of investors, and would he recommend such an approach to other entrepreneurs too?
Right. Arun wants to know the learning that you've had from various kind of investors, because you started with Arun, you moved on to Sequoia, and then you went on to Sofina, which is like a major international investor. The learnings, and if you would recommend a similar pattern for other startups that are in the process of really raising funding.
Okay. One thing which I want to point out here is we raised money only after figuring out a clear model in terms of we spent almost 3.5 years creating a very powerful product, compelling enough for students to learn on their own. Now we are talking about 11-year-olds, 12-year-olds. They normally don't like learning. It's not like the video games or the movies which is very close to them. So we have taken care of that by spending a lot of time researching, figuring out what is the best way to teach a certain subject, and also giving it in a format which they like. Now the investors came on board by the time we had a clear model, a revenue and a model which is making an impact, which anyway results in high profit. So they came on board recently. Now we have selected investors who like the segment, who've been active investors in the segment outside India. So not necessarily getting into the segment because suddenly they see a lot of action in EdTech because some of us have raised a lot of money in the last few months. So it's very important to get investors who understand the segment, who are excited the segment, so they can be real partners.
Great.
So they've been really good partners in the short span of time which we've been together.
Right. I guess a lot of important learnings there for startups, even in terms of the investors they choose, Krishna. But I guess that brings us to the end of the special deep dive today.
Absolutely, Chandra. I couldn't agree more with you. 2 lessons. 1 is that get your basics right, and 2, choose the right investors for the right reasons. That's the word. That's the message as far as Byju is concerned. Thank you so much, Byju Raveendran, and of course, Arun, Natarajan of Venture Intelligence, for taking time out to be with us here on ET Now Startup Central.
Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/ETNow, and don't forget to click the like button. You can also follow us on Twitter at ETNowLive. To stay updated with all our programming, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel by logging on to youtube.com/user/ETNow.